Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm Jordan and welcome to today's vlog, which is going to be an ARC reading vlog, which I'm very excited for. I have recently gotten back into my NetGalley game. If you're not familiar with NetGalley, it's a website where any person can go on and create an account and request to access digital e-ARCs or advanced reader copies of books that have not come out yet that they're trying to get reviews for to generate buzz, publicity, etc. for books before they release. It's a great resource for accessing ARCs, whether you are a small influencer or bigger, it doesn't really matter. All that really matters on the site is your review ratio, aka how many books you have been approved to read and review compared to how many you have actually submitted reviews for. They like to see you with a high percentage, and in general, I've kept a very high percentage, but in the last couple of months, I've started requesting more and more books because I am getting better about planning out anticipated releases and looking at what books are coming out. Therefore, I can request those books farther in advance. And I've gotten approved for a lot of them, which is driving my ratio down, meaning I need to get reading. So this vlog is going to be focused on reading all of the August ARCs that I have already been approved for. I have 6 of them as of today. I have about 2 weeks left in July, and I wanted to focus them on reading these ARCs before August so that I can get my reviews out. And so I think that should be enough time for these 6 books. The one caveat is that they are all ebooks. Reading ebooks is not my preferred format. I don't have a Kindle or any kind of actual e-reader. I can access NetGalley on my phone, which is how I usually read the ebooks that I get approved for. I also have an iPad that I have used in the past, but haven't in a while, but may break it out because I have so many to get through. But the next couple months are kind of going to be my trial run for as I get back into NetGalley. Do I want to invest in a Kindle or ask for it for Christmas or something so that I can prioritize e-reading a little bit more? We will see. That's not really the conversation I meant to have right now. Let's talk about the books that I have been approved for that are coming out in August that I will be reading in this video. So first of all, I have 3 books that are releasing August 1st. The first one is called The Trap by Catherine Ryan Howard. This is an author I have read from before. That's how this book came onto my radar. Let's see what the synopsis says. Okay, from award-winning, internationally best-selling crime writer Catherine Ryan Howard comes The Trap, an unsettling mystery inspired by a series of still unsolved disappearances in Ireland in the 90s, wherein one young woman risks everything to catch a faceless killer. 1 year ago, Lucy's sister Nikki left to meet friends at a pub in Dublin and never came home. Okay, so basically a thriller set in Ireland. Interesting, I don't think I've read a ton of thrillers set in Ireland, so that should be fun. I will save more of a synopsis for once I actually get into the book. The second book that I have been approved for is Family Lore by Elizabeth Acevedo. This is one of my favorite authors. I've read all of her young adult books so far, and this is her adult debut. This says, it is the story of one Dominican-American family told through the voices of its women as they await a gathering that will forever change their lives. I have no idea what that means or if this book is even going to be something that I enjoy. Typically, I don't enjoy big family sagas, but I love Elizabeth Acevedo, so I will give it a try. And then the third book releasing on the 1st is Mr. Magic by Kiersten White. I have not read from this author before. She released a book last year called Hide that was a horror book that got very mixed reviews. I did not think it was going to be my type of book, so I never picked it up. But I did kind of want to get ahead of the hype on this book, or just ahead of the buzz, whether it's good or bad. And the synopsis of this one, I believe it's also a horror. It says, who is Mr. Magic? Former child stars reunite to uncover the tragedy that ended their show and discover the secret of its enigmatic host in this dark supernatural thriller from #1 New York Times bestseller of Hide. 30 years after a tragic accident shut down production of the classic children's program Mr. Magic, the 5 surviving cast members have done their best to move on. Blah, blah, blah. Don't want to know too much. But I will definitely have to keep in mind that this is a supernatural thriller, meaning there will be fantastical elements, which is not always my cup of tea, but I do think knowing it going in will help my chances of enjoying it. Because I can't blame it on the book if I don't like the fantastical elements, because it's telling me that that's what it's going to be. All right, and then I have 2 books coming out on August 8th that I've been approved for. The first one is Dark Corners by Megan Golden. This is a book connected to The Night Swim by this author, which I did read and generally enjoyed. I have heard the only thing that's connected though is the podcast host that's just researching these 2 different cases. I've seen some positive reviews from people I follow on this book. I think I've also seen some mediocre reviews, so it could go either way. But the synopsis says Terrence Bailey is about to be released from prison for breaking and entering, though investigators have long suspected him in the murders of 6 women. As his freedom approaches, Bailey gets a surprise visit from Madison Logan, a hot young influencer with a huge social media following. Oh yeah, I do remember Robin from Paperbacks and Planners saying that this has some good commentary on social media influencer culture, and she really liked that element and she enjoyed this book as a whole. So hoping I follow her lead and also like it. And then the other book releasing on the 8th is The Last One by Will Dean. This is a thriller that says when Kaz steps on board the exclusive cruise liner RMS Atlantica, it's the start of a vacation of a lifetime with her new love, Pete. On their first night, they explore the ship, eat, dance, make friends, but when Kaz wakes the next morning, Pete is missing. And when she walks out into the corridor, all the cabin doors are open. To her horror, she soon realizes that the ship is completely empty. No passengers, no crew, nobody but her. That sounds so good. And Gabby from Gabby Reads read and really enjoyed this one. It is interesting that I've seen so many people read some of these books already, even though they are arcs, they haven't even come out yet. They're still already generating buzz. And then the last book that I will be reading in this video doesn't release until August 29th, but I still would like to read it the month ahead of time. It's called Happiness Falls by Angie Kim. This author wrote Miracle Creek, which was more of like a literary mystery type book, and I think this one is the same vein, kind of literary mystery. The synopsis says, when a father goes missing, his family's desperate search leads them to question everything they know about him and one another. Both a riveting page-turner and a deeply moving portrait of a family in crisis from the award-winning author of Miracle Creek. Don't need to know much more. I do have high hopes for this one, so we're just gonna go in with high expectations. So with that, I guess I'm gonna get into the reading portion. Not only do I not typically read ebooks, but I heavily usually listen to audiobooks, so it's going to be interesting working on this vlog over the next 2 weeks with no audiobooks for any of these books. That means I'm going to very consciously have to carve out reading time in my days to make sure I get enough physical reading done or ebook reading done to get this done in time. So it will be a challenge, but I am up for it. Otherwise, you know the drill. I will just take you along for whatever else I'm doing in my day-to-day life. In this vlog, I will probably mostly be organizing and cleaning my new house. We have recently moved into this house. We still have a lot of unpacking to do, as well as camping. My family does a big camping trip every summer, and ours falls within the next 2 weeks, so I'll probably have some footage of that as well. That should be good reading time. All good things. I will be back with an update once I have at least started one of these books, if not finished one, to give you more in-depth of a synopsis and tell you my thoughts. Okay, hi, same location, different day. Wanted to check in because I have started Dark Corners. I'll go ahead and pop the cover up here as I'm talking about it since I am reading the ebook version. Let me scoot over and make more room. I am on page 58 of this ebook copy. I'm not exactly sure if that equals to 58 pages in the physical book, but I just got to chapter 14 and I thought it would be a good time to update. Although maybe not, because this book is going to be a little bit hard to describe. There's a lot of different things happening. At the base of it, we're again following the same true crime podcast host as in The Night Swim. This book did do a pretty quick recap of who she is and why she's so popular and the different cases she's covered, one of them being the one in The Night Swim. It doesn't spoil what happened necessarily other than she solves the case. But yeah, it just kind of catches you up there. And then this book starts right after that book in where she gets home after that case, planning to just relax because it took a lot out of her. And then she gets a mysterious phone call from this place in Florida, this prison in Florida, that needs her to come down, and they introduce her to this other case. And I'm a little unclear at exactly what she's solving, and she's a little bit unclear about it too, because she's told about this potential serial killer named, I think his name is Terrence, and he's being held in prison. She's getting kind of the backstory on him, but also there's this influencer that is connected with Terrence's case, but the police are not really sure why. and this influencer named Madison came to talk to Terrence in prison. He had had no visitors for the entire time he was there. All of a sudden, she comes to visit him. They have a conversation that is private. Nobody is sure what exactly they talked about. The only thing they know is that this podcast host's name came up, Rachel. And so that's why police brought her in to see why they would be talking about her. She claims to have no idea. And then also Madison has since gone missing. So I'm not really sure what Rachel is going to be finding out. I guess there are kind of three mysteries. She's trying to find out why they were talking about her and how she's involved in this case. She's also, I think, going to be figuring out what Terrence actually did, if he is a serial killer, and then also what has happened to Madison. On top of all of this, there are also excerpts from the podcast that Rachel hosts. And she starts out by talking about a case that seems unrelated. This is one kind of critique I have about the actual book so far. Let me see if I can find an example. So it's really hard to see on the iPad. It's also hard to see when I'm reading it. Let me see if I can make the text way bigger. But basically the text of most of the chapters is regular serif font. And then on the chapters that are the podcast excerpts, it goes to a sans serif font, but there's no indication that this is like a piece of the podcast. And I think, and I've heard from people who have the audio arc of this book, that in the audiobook version, it's produced like a podcast. So you know that that's what you're listening to. So it makes a little bit more sense. But I just had to guess that and know that from watching those other reviews. Nowhere on here does this say that this is the podcast. And that may be something that's going to be formatted differently and fixed in the final, print copy of this book. I just wanted to point it out as something that is confusing for me as the reader, and I'm glad I did pick up on it relatively early, but also just in case any of you also have, the E arc of this book, you know that the sans serif chapters are the podcast excerpts. And again, I also only know that because in the first book, it did a similar thing. But had I just picked this up on a whim and not read that first book and didn't know what it was going into it, I would have no idea that this was a podcast. So I find that to be a weird choice, and hopefully it does get fixed for the final version. But yeah, I don't have too much else to update on so far. I am going to go ahead and finish this book. I would say I'm generally enjoying it. Again, I'm a little bit confused on what exactly we're trying to solve here, but that does leave a lot of room for puzzle pieces to be connected and things to be revealed, so I'm interested in that. So excited to keep reading, and I will let you know probably once I've gone ahead and finished this book, because I won't want to spoil anything later on in the plot. So I'll just let you know how it all comes together, how I enjoy it, once I have finished Dark Corners. Okay, quick non-reading update. Let me get myself straight. I'm in my office. My office is currently very echoey. Hopefully you can't hear the kids' movie that they're watching out there. So to combat the echo, I ordered some sound absorbing panels that just came, and they're much larger than I was expecting. There are 12 in each of these packs, and I was thinking I would use them for some kind of design or something. I have this big open empty space here behind my desk chair that's my background for work meetings and stuff that I thought I could fill with these. But then also earlier today I was at Michael's and they were having a sale on canvases where you could buy two, get two free. So I found a size that would also fit perfectly. I found these really long and skinny ones that if I put 4 side by side, they will also fit perfectly between those sconces. So I could also put those up, and they're not sound absorbing, but still I think they will help. Because they are canvas, they will just help in having a fabric-y material up on the walls. And then I could put the sound panels elsewhere. So I'm not exactly sure what I'm doing yet, but I did just get all this stuff. So I wanted to introduce what I'm doing. So then if I show some B-roll of me testing some things out, setting some stuff up on the walls, you know what I'm doing. And eventually, of course, I would like to decorate these canvases somehow, but I think I will just hang them up white for now to make sure I get the spacing right, and then can give myself more time to decorate them at a later date. But I also wanted to record this clip to get a before sound check to see how echoey it is before I put this stuff up, and then come back and do a direct comparison to a video clip in here afterwards. Fingers crossed it's less echoey. So that's what I'm going to work on tonight, as well as reading the rest of Dark Corners, and I will let you know how both accounts go. Okay, back with a couple of updates. First things first, I am halfway through my soundproofing of the office, putting up the sound panels as you saw, 12 of them. So yeah, exactly halfway through those. I also put up these canvases, which look okay. I didn't want to spend too much time perfectly refining, making them level and evenly spaced, because I do have plans to like decorate them somehow. So I'm probably gonna take them off for that, and then once I put them back up for good, then I can like really fine-tune their spacing and stick them down so they really don't move. But for now, I just wanted to make sure that I like generally how they look on the wall, and I do. So that's good news. Hopefully the echoing is slightly better and will only continue to get better. But I wanted to check in because I also have some reading updates. First things first, I finished Dark Corners. This book took me quite a while to finish. I think it's for various reasons. One, it's the summertime, so it's very busy. I don't have a lot of physical reading time. I also just am not very accustomed to reading an ebook. It's not that I don't like it, the act of actually reading on my iPad. I find it generally enjoyable. It works on my eyes and stuff. It's just the concept of if I'm on my phone, I get distracted. If I am reading on my iPad, but I don't have it within arm's reach, then it's an extra step to go get it. It just feels like a slightly added barrier than reading audiobooks or physical books for some reason. But all that to say, I did eventually finish it, and I have fine feelings about it. On one hand, there were things I really liked about it. I liked the general mystery, I liked the main character, and I like that she is a like strong, independent, intelligent woman. I do think we don't see enough of those in mystery thrillers. Oftentimes we get the unreliable, spacey type of main character, especially when it's a female. And so I like that this podcast host knows her stuff. She knows what red flags to look for, she knows how to do research, she has a team behind her, or specifically like her one producer guy who she can reach out to bounce ideas off of and to have do additional research for her. She puts things down on record, she interacts with the police, so she's not trying to subvert their investigations. I really like that about the main character and about this story series in particular. The crime itself, I always struggle when there are a whole bunch of victims to keep straight, which is inherently difficult about a serial killer story, because to be a serial killer, they have to have multiple victims. I find it a little bit hard to, one, keep track of that many female victims, and unfortunately also care about them. If I can't get much of a backstory for each of the victims or have some reason to really care for their justice, then I don't know, they all just kind of blend together. And yes, I can understand the concept of a serial killer being bad. I just don't have the deep desire and rooted interest in the solving of the mystery. So all in all, I was generally satisfied with where the book went. I could have done without the slight romantic element included in this book. I did generally enjoy the influencer culture commentary, but again, nothing revolutionary, so I'm going to give this one 3 stars. I do think fans of The Night Swim will like this book, though I will say this book is not as difficult to read on a content perspective. Of course, there are still content warnings because murder is obviously very prevalent, sexual assault is also addressed, but the case is not a rape case, and it's not so closely connected to a very public case that so many of us know and care about. So that could be a good thing if that first book bothered you in that aspect, but it also, I think, could hinder the connection that some readers have to this book. So all in all, glad I read it. Would generally recommend it if the subject matter sounds interesting to you. That one comes out on August 8th, so keep an eye out if you are interested. Then I started a book yesterday that I'm so excited about. I was first going to start The Trap by Catherine Ryan Howard. Then I realized it has a very similar tone and storyline where it's more of a standard crime novel, and I wanted to shift gears, so I decided to start Mr. Magic by Kiersten White, which I believe is a supernatural thriller, is how it's described in the synopsis. And I am loving it. This book is following a woman who is 38 years old, and 30 years ago, when she was 8 years old, she was on a children's television program that all of a sudden had an accident. The show shut down, her father took her and fled, and she's been living isolated at this ranch ever since, so for 30 years. And at the very beginning of this book, her father passes away, a notice about it is put on Facebook, and all of a sudden she is kind of ambushed or just surprised by some of her fellow co-stars from that children's show who are doing a reunion podcast and wanted to see if it was really her and wanted to reconnect with her after 30 years of not speaking about the show or what happened. What's interesting about this book is that the main character that we're following has absolutely no memories of what happened. So she's being told by these people around her what the show was and what their relationships were like because she doesn't remember any of them. She legitimately doesn't remember anything about her life before 8 years old. So very interesting setup, and I am loving learning about this TV show and what happened. It is very creepy. They go to this very creepy setting. The descriptions of the show 30 years ago and of what's happening to them now, I'm equally invested in finding out both. I do think there's some sort of magical element that's going to come out. I can make guesses as to what it is, but I haven't been directly told yet. I'm interested to find out what that is. I am going in with the mindset that this is going to be a strange book, so hopefully that means the supernatural elements will work for me, but so far I'm really liking it, and I'm about 100 pages in. I also wanted to share, okay, I'm on chapter 8, page 105, and I wanted to share the chapter titles of this book. So on the table of contents, I noticed this after like the title page, dedication, prologue. The chapters go 1, 2, buckle my shoe, 3, 4, lock the door, 5, 6, pick up sticks, 7, 8, bar the gate, 9, 10, he's here again, 11, 12, all by ourselves, 13, 14, don't be seen, 15, 16, don't be mean, 17, 18, stay so clean, 19, 20, darkness plenty. And I love that. It just adds that little bit of extra creepiness factor. And the actual like titles of the chapters are that. So when you get to chapter 3, it's actually buckle my shoe because it comes after 2. And then after that is chapter 3. I don't know yet if that actually means anything for the story, but I thought it was just a fun, you know, extra element to add to this type of book. So I am so excited to continue reading this book. I can totally see myself flying through the next 170 pages tonight because I am that interested to find out what happens, and I hope my enjoyment just keeps going up and up and up, but of course I will let you know either way. But I'm excited, and I also haven't seen any reviews for this book yet, which makes me excited to have a completely unbiased opinion of it. Fingers crossed I continue loving it, but I'm gonna go ahead and get back to reading it tonight. I will let you know once I finished it what my final thoughts are, and then we'll keep this video moving. Okay, I'm back with some updates. First things first, I finished Mr. Magic. Of course I did. I flew through that book and I loved the experience of reading this book. It's one of those books that actually made me excited to keep reading it and reminded me why I love reading, because I just wanted to get to the end of this book and figure out what was going on. And every time I wasn't reading this book, I was thinking about reading it, and it was just so much fun. And for that, I really appreciate it. For the most part, I really enjoyed this story. I told you guys from the start, I knew this book would be weird. I really had to get my head ready for that because I don't typically enjoy weird books. And I will say the end of this book got a little too weird for my personal taste. And that's okay. I think I did everything I could do to prepare myself, and I can still accept that I don't love weird, supernatural, abstract, magic-y type books. And this is as close to me enjoying one as it gets. So I am going to give this book 4 stars, and that's totally a personal preference thing about just where this book goes. I would have absolutely loved it if it would have like curved, twisted into firm reality, but that's not what it did. That's not what it said it was going to do. That's okay. It just wasn't a 5-star book, but it was a 4-star book. I really liked it. I'm curious to find out what people who do like weird books are going to think about this, because I think for like 75% of the book, it's actually pretty realistic, and though it's clear where it's headed until it actually explains itself there's some amount of like plausible deniability, or a sense of like, this could be magic, this could be explained by real things. So I just don't know if people who like really weird books are gonna be bored by that first part of the book or not. I don't know. All I know is I had a really fun time, and I would recommend this book to anyone who thinks that general premise of the childhood TV show sounds interesting, because to me it was very unique and memorable. I do think I will remember this book and its plot for a long time, which does say something. Then, after finishing that book, I've actually started 2 other books. I started The Last One by Will Dean. I'm about 100 pages in. This is a book about a woman who goes on a cruise with her boyfriend, who she's thinking may propose to her on this cruise. Chapter 1 is them getting onto the cruise ship, getting acclimated to the layout, kind of making plans for the rest of the cruise. They go to dinner, they talk to some other guests of the cruise, they get to know their waiter, they go to bed as normal that first night, and then chapter 2 is the woman waking up realizing that her boyfriend's not there in the bed with her. She's not sure where he is. She thinks he's probably at breakfast without her. So she leaves her room to go look for him, and then realizes that there's nobody else on board this entire cruise ship. And it goes from there. She obviously explores the rest of the ship to see if she can find anybody else who can explain what's going on. And as somebody who loves cruises, I've been on multiple cruises, I know and can visualize what this ship looks like really well. This is a terrifying concept because they are just so big. They are built for thousands of people. And while some people might consider it a dream to be on a cruise ship all by themselves, if that's not what you were planning and expecting, then that's a huge nightmare. And I'm loving this story. I'm loving reading about what she's doing, what she's finding. I can't wait to find out where else this book goes. I hear it has some crazy twists. Definitely a true thriller in that my heart is pumping for her. I'm flipping through the pages. I want to get to the end to find out what's going on. So that book is going well. I'm reading that one on my iPad as an ebook. And then I've also started Family Lore by Elizabeth Acevedo. The reason I started this at the same time is because I realized I actually don't have this book through NetGalley. I have an early copy of this book through Libro. Libro FM is an audiobook app and service, and they provide what are called ALCs, or advanced listener copies, to book influencers every month. And this was one of their selections for July, which is amazing because this book doesn't come out until August. So I started the audiobook of this one, and this book is very different. I will say this book can definitely best be described as a family saga about this family that has like very slight magical powers. And it's almost the type of magic that could be just described as like folklore or family lore, you know, like been kind of passed down for generations. It's almost more like psychic abilities more than magical powers. And to be honest, on paper, if you were to ask me if I like family sagas or if I like books about people with slightly magical powers, the answer to both of those is no. So I'm kind of set up to not enjoy this book, but I do love Elizabeth Acevedo and I want to support her and read her newest book. I'm just a little afraid that I'm not going to love this one, and from the first few chapters that I've listened to, I'm a little bored. There are definitely things in here that I love. She brings up some very important topics around motherhood and womanhood that are extremely relatable. It's just the actual plot is fairly non-existent. The other interesting thing about this book is that, at least for these first few chapters, the chapters are counting down the days until one of the women in this family is having a wake for herself, but she's not dead yet. She wants a living wake. And of course, everyone else in the family thinks it's super weird. They don't know why she's doing this. They don't know if it's some weird like prediction of her own death. They don't know. They're going along with it, but it's clear that this is going to be some strange event. And I'm just now getting to the point where it's the day of the wake, and I'm not sure what's gonna happen, but that's really the only thing stringing this book along. Otherwise, it's just about these women in this family that have these interesting abilities and are living their lives. So we will see how the rest of this book goes and how my enjoyment of it goes. I'm already calling it that if I don't like this one, it's not because it's a bad book. I actually think if there's any author that could write a family saga about magical women that I would enjoy, it would be Elizabeth Acevedo, but that will be a tough job. But either way, I'll let you know, and we will just go from there. So I am going to continue reading these 2 books. I'll be back once I've finished at least one of them. I do want to finish these books relatively quickly. This weekend, my family is going camping, and while camping is great reading time, it's not great vlog updating time. I find it hard to get myself alone and in a quiet space where I can like give reading updates. So we'll see how that goes. I would like to not have that many books left for this vlog by then. Today is Wednesday. We leave on Friday. And as an extra wrench, my daughter has been sick and home from daycare the last 2 days. So that's been fun, navigating, taking care of her with working. It's all gonna be fine. It's just been a busy week, as it always is. So I will continue managing. But yeah, gonna get back to reading while she is down for a nap and while I have a little bit of a break from meetings. I'll be back with an update when I have one. Hello everyone, back with some updates. Several days have passed. Camping weekend has come and gone. I didn't fully complete my goal of finishing all the books before camping or during camping, but I do have updates on the 2 books that I was in the middle of in my last update. So first things first, I finished the last one by Jordyn. I am so glad I read this book. I loved it. This is like the perfect thriller for me. This book and my review of this book are really reminding me of Reckless Girls by Rachel Hawkins. Not really because of the book itself. The plot is not that similar. The writing style, I can't remember. I don't really think it's that similar, but I have a feeling that I'm going to rave about this book. And there are going to be some people that agree with me, but there are also going to be a lot of people who don't like this book, and I'm gonna have to be okay with that. Just the vague premise of this book in general and how little you have to know going into it, by nature, I think opens itself up to some people really enjoying the direction it goes in and some people not enjoying it. And that's okay. It's just unfortunate that because we don't want to spoil this book when we talk about it, we're not gonna be able to warn off the people who aren't gonna like it beforehand. You know what I mean? But I think it's so worth it and so satisfying to not know what's about to happen or anything that's gonna happen in this book and just let it unfold before your eyes and just go with it. It's very over the top, a little bit unrealistic, but it's so much fun. I don't think I need to say anything else about the premise of this book because the first 2 chapters are all you really need to know in terms of what's given to you in the synopsis. Plus, with this being an early review copy, I definitely don't want to share anything that's not supposed to be out before it's even published. But I just loved it so much. I gave it 5 stars. Was it perfect? No. Am I left with a few questions and like nitpicky things that I could pick out about the book that didn't quite add up or that can't be explained with logic? Yes. But was it still perfect for me and did I eat it all right up? Yes, I did. So it's a 5-star book. Thank you so much to Gabby for introducing me to this one and her review on it, selling it so much that I requested it on NetGalley. I'm so happy I read it. I can't wait to get myself a copy, and I will have to look more into Jordyn's other books. I haven't read anything else by him, but if everything he writes is this over the top and just fun for thrillers, then I may enjoy more of his books. The other book that I have an update on is Family Lore by Elizabeth Acevedo. Unfortunately, I'm going to DNF this book. I've gotten 32% of the way in, which isn't all that far, but I just don't think this is the book for me. Based on the synopsis, based on other reviews I looked up on Goodreads. I did also watch a whole review video on YouTube posted by Vina at Ms. WOC Reader. I will link it below. It's a great review. She really enjoyed the book and listed several reasons why she enjoyed it. She also mentioned some comp like titles and authors that if you enjoyed their style of writing, you might enjoy this one. Just based on her thoughts and again my impression of this book on a whole, it is a sweeping magical family saga. That's just not something I enjoy. And one of the first things Vina said in her review is that this book is not Elizabeth Acevedo's young adult books written from an adult perspective. It's very different. It's different in its tone, it's different in the type of story it's trying to tell, and that makes me okay in understanding that I can enjoy Elizabeth Acevedo's young adult works to date and accept that maybe her adult works, or at least this first one, is not gonna be for me, and that's okay. It is different. And so I'm going to DNF this one so that I don't, first of all, have to finish it because I'm just not interested in picking it up. But then also I don't have to give it a star rating and potentially harm it before it even comes out. I want it to find its intended audience. So if you like family sagas, if you like very light magic that, again, in that video review, Vina says is not so much magical powers, it's more just like the power that Caribbean women and African women have inside of them. If that sounds interesting to you, I hope you love this book. I highly recommend it to you. But if you're like me and you need plot, you need realistic elements in your contemporary books, and you like them to be a little bit faster paced and not kind of meandering family books, then maybe just wait a little bit longer before picking this one up and look up more people's reviews as they come out. But I'm gonna set this one down. I do still have the audio on Libro, it won't go away. So in the future, if I feel more in the mood for this type of story and I want to pick it up, I can do so. But for now, it's just not what I'm feeling. So with that, that means I have 2 books left for this video. I've got The Trap by Catherine Ryan Howard and Happiness Falls by Angie Kim. Excited for both of them still. I may continue this reading 2 books at once thing that I've started, even though that's not my typical method of reading. I think these 2 books will be different enough that it will be very easy for me to keep them straight, and that way I can get a feel for both of them, both of their tones, and also hopefully push myself to read them both quickly. So I'm gonna go ahead and do like a mini try a chapter type thing. I might actually do like a try 5 chapters of both of them, and then the next time I come back at you, I will have an update on both of them. I can give both of their initial premises, and then we'll get on with reading them both, and we'll wrap this video up. Okay, quick update. It is the same day, just a little bit later. I started the first book. I started The Trap by Catherine Ryan Howard, and I was immediately sucked in by this book. I've now read about 50 pages, so to give a little bit of a synopsis, the very first chapter jumps in following this woman who gets in this car with a stranger. It's the middle of the night, her phone is dead, and then she immediately picks up on some weird behavior things that he's doing. She gets a little nervous. Within her inner monologue and their conversation, we learn that multiple women in this town they're in have recently gone missing, and she starts to think that the guy she's in the car with could be that killer. At first, based on that, I was getting Survive the Night vibes by Riley Sager. However, very quickly after that, we learned that she was actually trying to find the guy who was responsible for all of these missing women because her sister is one of the missing women. She is trying to find the guy responsible. It's been over a year since her sister has gone missing. The police have no leads in terms of suspects or knowing whether she's still alive or not. She's just trying to take things in her own hands and thinking that if she can get into the car with the killer or the abductor, then maybe she can find her sister. And so that's only the first chapter, and I'm now 50 pages in. We've also gotten 2 other perspectives. One is a woman who works in the missing persons unit within this police system. This book is set in Ireland, which is interesting. So there are a few like cultural differences or wording differences for what they call the police and things like that. It's pretty easy to understand otherwise though. I do imagine that this book on audio probably has a narrator with an Irish accent. I'm not sure, but since I am not from Ireland, I'm reading it with an American accent, and it's otherwise feeling pretty normal. But anyway, this other perspective is this woman who works in the missing persons unit, and someone comes up to the front desk and says that they have physical evidence about one of the missing women, so potentially a breakthrough with that. And then we also got a third perspective that I believe is from the villain's point of view. It wasn't very specific in terms of who he is. He was just talking about his wife and his wife's fascination with like true crime, with serial killers, and how she always says like she would know if she was living with a Ted Bundy, and he's being like, you do, but you don't. Like, you do live with a Ted Bundy and you don't realize it. So that was interesting, but long story long, I am interested in just continuing with this story. It also is relatively short. My NetGalley ebook version is only 238 pages, so I should be able to zoom through this pretty quickly. And when I started Happiness Falls, I only got a couple pages in, but it starts with a missing father, and so I'm a little bit worried that the mystery elements of both books would get confused in my brain. I'm guessing if I get further into it, the tone would be different, but still, I don't want details to get confused on the mystery elements. So I'm gonna hold off on reading that one anymore until I finish The Trap. So that's the new plan. Does anybody get annoyed when you hear a vlogger say a plan on camera and then completely deviate from that plan? I don't know. I try not to do that, but sometimes, you know, sometimes your plans don't work out and you gotta pivot, and the vlog would be confusing if I didn't explain why I was pivoting. I don't know. I'm gonna get back to reading this ebook when I get a chance. I'll be back once I have finished The Trap, can give you a final review, and then hopefully can give Happiness Falls its fair chance and read that one quickly thereafter. Okay, penultimate update because I finished The Trap, and before I get into it, yes, that is a children's blow-up pool behind me because I am about to bring it outside and fill it up for the kids to play in tonight. But anyway, I finished The Trap today, and first of all, funny story. You know how I mentioned this book is set in Ireland and I was talking about like the audiobook and it would probably have an accent? Well, later the day that I said that, Libro dropped its August ALCs, which is advanced listener copies of audiobooks that they offer to book influencers, and The Trap is one of the ones that they had. So I immediately downloaded that audiobook and I listened to it for the rest of the book. And yes, it is all told in Irish accents, so I think that could either be a pro or con based on what you're looking for. If you're looking for authenticity, it definitely puts you more into the setting of Ireland, but maybe if accents are hard for you to understand or something, then just keep that in mind before you potentially spend money on an audiobook for this book. But I just thought that that was funny that I specifically brought up the audiobook and then it became available to me when usually audiobooks for ARCs don't really happen. Okay, my overall thoughts on this book. There are things that I really liked about it, but at the same time, there are things that I really didn't. The first thing I didn't like is it was very confusing for most of the book, keeping the perspectives straight because it would switch between chapters. It would switch whose point of view you were reading from, but it didn't label the chapters with whose point of view it was from. And so in some ways the audio helped with that, but even still, it took a little while to get used to whose voice was whose perspective and to really know for a fact, like, okay, I'm in Lucy's head right now, or I'm in Angela's head right now, etc. I wish that was a little bit more clear. I think it would have kept me in the story better. I wouldn't have been thinking about who I was reading from. I would have just been enjoying the story. That is something that could potentially be changed or added before, you know, final publication. They could put POV headers on the chapters, but just a note that if you're reading and you have that experience, I had the same thing. I also, for the middle portion of this book, was just a little bit bored. I was invested in the mystery, but for some reason I wasn't like rushing to turn the pages, or when I was listening to the audiobook, I wasn't like on the edge of my seat hanging on every word trying to figure out what was going on until the ending. I did really like the ending of this book. It had a type of twist that I do particularly like, which of course I'm not going to say what it is because I don't want to spoil it. But a few things happened that I was like, oh, that was really clever. Makes me think about some of the things I've already read a little bit differently. And so I always enjoy that. And it was fun because Sydney at Sydney Page Books posted on her Instagram story that she had DNF'd this book because she just wasn't invested. She was also confused with like the characters and keeping them straight. And so I messaged her and was like, I can give you all the spoilers if you want. And she said, yes, please. So it was fun that I was able to like explain the twists to her. I'm not sure exactly why I find that so fun, but it was a good twist and conclusion to this book. So I'm glad about that. And if you want me to completely spoil this book for you, just send me a message on Instagram and I will happily do that for you if you don't plan on reading this book. The other thing that I did like about this book was I mentioned we get like the villain's perspective for a couple of chapters, and that continues through the book. And I really liked his perspective. She did a good job of making him not someone you're rooting for or even understanding, but he's kind of funny, and like the things he says, you're either laughing at him because they're ridiculous things that he's saying that either you know he's going to be caught out on later, or you can tell like he thinks he's smarter than he is, or at times he's claiming to not be as smart as people might think because he's saying like, I fully expect to be caught. This is an impulse I have. I'm not all planned out perfectly. Like I'm just doing this for the thrill and the satisfaction that it gives me. And whenever I get caught, the jig is up, I get caught, but I'm gonna keep doing this until I get caught because he thinks it's fun. And I thought that was a fun kind of perspective or take on the villain's point of view. And we really did get some insight from his chapters that I thought were interesting. And those ones, at least in the audiobook, are told in a male's voice. So it was very easy to keep his chapters straight from the other female points of view. So yeah. So for my rating for this book, I'm between a 3 and a 4. I think it's ultimately going to be a 3-star. I think once the details fade in my memory, I don't think this is a standout thriller. I don't think this is a book that a ton of people are going to absolutely love. I feel like it's pretty mediocre for the most part. Again, it does have that twist that I did enjoy, but it's not like a mind-blowing, you absolutely have to read this book type of twist. I don't know. I think I'm gonna go with 3 stars. Still really glad to have read it, and if it does sound particularly interesting to you, I think it's worth a read. It's just definitely not a thriller that I'm going to think about and rave about all the time going forward. So with that, I have also started Happiness Falls. And I don't know what it is, you guys. I'm feeling like I'm in the opposite of a reading slump right now. I am just loving the books that I'm reading. I'm loving the act of reading. And this is another book that I was just immediately drawn into. And it's not because it's particularly fast paced. It's not because the plot is inherently interesting. I just want to know what's going to happen, and the pages are flying by. So I am already about 80 pages into Happiness Falls. It is following this family whose father has disappeared. The family is made up of a mother and then 2 20-year-old twins, a boy and a girl, and then a 14-year-old son who has autism and another diagnosis that I can't remember what it is. I don't know a lot about that area, but of course a lot of their time and energy goes towards that 14-year-old and making sure he's okay. He's nonverbal, so he can't communicate with the rest of his family, so they definitely have to alter kind of their routines and how they communicate with him and try to get his needs met. That's all very interesting, but again, it's all about the day that they realize their father is missing and trying to figure out what's happened to him. This book is separated into parts, and I just reached part 2. They're finding things out, and I'm really interested. It's only told from the daughter's point of view, so one of the 20-year-old twins. She feels particularly guilty because she, based on what happened the day the dad disappeared, her actions caused the investigation to be delayed by a few hours, and as many of us know, like in a missing persons case, the first few hours that they're missing are the most critical hours to be searching for them and the most likely time when they will be found. And the more time that passes, the less likely that they are going to be found, let alone alive. So she feels really guilty about what happened that day and kind of her role that she played in that. And I really like Angie Kim's writing. This book is very similar to Miracle Creek in that it's not a thriller, it's not fast-paced, it's a mystery centering around family dynamics. And what I really like is I'm noticing she does a really good job at forming these characters' memories and lives in a way that, like, when a character is talking about something that's happening and maybe feelings that they're having about what's happening, she will weave in memories and things that have happened before that are giving context to why they're feeling a certain way about what's happening now. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but I think it would be very easy for that type of writing to feel like information overload, or like it's just convenient that things are happening or things are being referenced in their life that relate to things from the past. But in this book, it just feels very organic and like we're getting a lot of backstory about this family in a really naturally integrated way. Hopefully that makes sense. I just really like this author's writing, and I like that it is centered around family dynamics, but there is also a very firm plot because we are trying to find the dad. So far I think if you liked Angie Kim's previous book, Miracle Creek, which I did really like, then all signs are pointing towards also enjoying this one. Fingers crossed that that's what continues for my reading of the rest of this book. But so far, so good. I can't wait to continue reading it and solve the mystery, for more things to be revealed about the family and the dad and their history and what he was doing that day. And I'm loving it. So I'm gonna go ahead and get back to reading that whenever I can today. Hopefully we'll be back very soon with an update once I've finished it, can give my final wrap up on this book and all of the books that I've read for this video as a whole. So next time I check in should be that final update. Okay, I am back with the update because I finished Happiness Falls and I loved this book so much. As I was reading this book, I was like consciously telling myself to soak it all in and enjoy the book as I was reading it because I knew it was special. So the first thing that I love about this book is the way it's written, the writing style. I am not someone who typically cares all that much about writing style, but this book feels like it was written perfectly for me. And I was reading some reviews and someone described it as nerdy narration. And that is so true. And that's what I loved about it, because this main character named Mia, she narrated the book as I often find myself talking and writing. I'm a little bit wordy, especially when I'm writing things like at work or whatever, or even what I just did. Like I always have to qualify what I'm saying with additional context or additional information to make sure I'm being as clear as possible and thorough. And sometimes it's repetitive, but I just don't want anything to be taken out of context or any assumptions to be made that I didn't clarify. And that's what this book did. So it was kind of wordy, but it wasn't wordy to make the story more beautiful or even more descriptive from like a sensory standpoint. It was wordy and more detailed to give context to whatever was being discussed. And I loved it. I was like, yes, go on all the tangents. Tell us all the backstories to make whatever you're talking about now relevant. It was really well done. I was never bored in this story, despite it being a fairly slow moving story. I think I already told the plot pretty clearly in that it's about this family trying to find their missing father. But more than that, it also studies the concept of happiness, hence the title Happiness Falls, which I also realize is kind of a nod to Miracle Creek, with like happiness and miracle being similar words, and then falls and creeks referring to bodies of water. Anyway, it talked about the concept of happiness in a very scientific and nerdy way. It talked about paradoxes and fallacies and biases that human beings have, and how those influence everyday situations and conversations. It covered other laws of philosophy and just philosophical ideas that were all so interesting. I learned a lot in this book about autism and Angelman syndrome, which are not topics that I have a lot of personal experience with or knowledge about, and this author clearly does. And I so appreciated that, and I loved how, again, this main character, Mia, gave context to everything that happened with her family through the lens of being a family with a character with autism and AS. I learned things like how the use of the term nonverbal for someone who doesn't speak is incorrect language, and nonverbal and non-speaking are not interchangeable, because nonverbal implies that they don't have any words in their mind, when often people with these diagnoses do. They just need other ways of getting those words out and communicating them. So they're non-speaking, but that doesn't mean they're nonverbal. And the main character, when talking about that, she had a line where she said, "I've brought this up to people and they dismiss it as just semantics, but sometimes semantics matter. Words matter. They influence our thoughts." And that's so true, whether it's conscious or unconscious. All of these things influence our thoughts, they influence our actions, and they influence all kinds of things that happen down the line from something that we might say without thinking or without knowing what exactly we're saying. I thought that was great. I also learned what the word epistemological means, which was very cool. Let's see what else I wrote down in my notes. This is a very slow burn mystery, but I was constantly intrigued by things that were happening throughout. And also often at the end of the chapters, there would be some kind of like mini cliffhanger or just something that would happen or be referenced or have like the dun 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 type feeling about it that made me want to constantly keep reading. I also loved a part that happened. There were multiple like twists and reveals kind of throughout this book. And at one point, the main character said that in books and movies, she loves twists that make you think differently about things that had happened previously and make you want to go back and reread them. Which, by the way, I just said that about The Trap, the last book I read. I also love that. But she was saying when it happens in real life, it's one of the worst feelings because it means that you misinterpreted something and that impacted how you reacted and how you treated people. And sometimes that can have really dire consequences. And I've definitely never thought about that before, but so true. Man, I loved this book. I overall would say if you enjoyed this author's previous book, Miracle Creek, then I definitely think you'll enjoy this one. Writing style is similar, type of story is similar. This one does not have like the actual court scenes that Miracle Creek did, but still similar in a lot of ways. Also, Long Bright River by Liz Moore, The Last Thing He Told Me by Laura Dave, and Everything I Never Told You by Celeste Ng. I would say any or all of those. If you enjoyed them, you probably will enjoy this. And otherwise, if the subject matter sounds interesting at all, pick it up, give it a try. Hopefully the writing works for you. If it doesn't, I understand, because again, it feels like the writing was perfect for me, which inherently means it's not going to be perfect for everybody, but it was so good. This probably is going to be in my top at least 3 books of 2023. We'll see how this one lingers in my mind. I'm guessing it'll do well, but you never know. So I don't want to count my eggs before they hatch, but I really loved this book. I would love to discuss this book to anyone else who reads it once it comes out at the end of August. But all right, I think I've rambled on long enough about that one book. So let's wrap up this video and let's talk about the 6 arcs that I read for this video. I would say this was a wildly successful reading vlog. I feel really happy about everything that I ended up reading, even though I didn't love everything. I'm still glad I read it, or at least gave it a try. I will have all of these books linked below with their release dates and where you can order them from. Some of them have already come out. By the time I'm posting this, we're already into August. But for the ones that haven't come out yet, consider either pre-ordering them or checking them out once they do come out. Let me know if you have read any of the books that I've mentioned here, whether you got an arc or have read one of the ones that came out on the 1st already, or let me know if I've convinced you to pick any of these up. I would love to discuss them once you do. Other than that, I don't think I have anything else. So thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in my next one.